Richard Kane was the kind of man people wrote about in business magazines. A name that inspired both admiration and quiet fear. The founder of Kane Dynamics, a company that revolutionized artificial intelligence and automation across industries. He built everything from scratch, no family fortune, no lucky break, just decades of obsession, discipline, and sacrifice. People said Richard didn't just run a company, he built an empire. Every wall in his glass office told a story, awards, photos, memories of sleepless nights that turned into success. But beneath all of that, Richard had one. Belief, loyalty is the most valuable currency in business. That was why he trusted Ethan Kross. Ethan was the company's rising star, young, sharp, and effortlessly charming. He joined Kane Dynamics as an intern, but it didn't take long for Richard to notice his brilliance. While others saw just another ambitious employee, Richard saw potential, maybe even a reflection of his younger self. Ethan was different. He stayed late when others left early. He asked questions no one dared to ask. He was confident, but not arrogant, at least, not yet. So Richard took him under his wing. He invited him to executive meetings, gave him access to high-level files, and introduced him to powerful investors. Within a year, Ethan became his right-hand man, the employee everyone envied, and the one Richard trusted most. Outsiders. Their relationship looked like that of father and son. Richard spoke about Ethan with pride, and Ethan in public always spoke of Richard with deep respect. But deep down, something darker had begun to grow inside Ethan, something Richard couldn't see first. It was harmless envy. He watched how people treated Richard, how his presence could silence a room, how one word from him could shift entire markets. Ethan admired that power. But admiration slowly turned into obsession. He started wondering why he couldn't be in that position. Why was he always standing beside greatness instead of being the one everyone bowed to? Richard, unknowingly, fed that fire. He kept praising Ethan, calling him the future of Kane Dynamics. And every compliment, every bit of trust, only made Ethan more restless. Then came the moment that changed everything. It was a quiet night at the office. Most employees had gone home. Ethan stayed behind to finish a report for Richard. While waiting for a file to download, he noticed Richard's office door slightly open. Out of curiosity, or perhaps instinct, he walked in. When Ethan entered Richard's office, he found a hard copy file labeled Project Helix. At first, he flipped through it slowly, printed graphs, handwritten notes, and signatures. It was clearly something confidential. But what caught his attention wasn't just the papers. It was the laptop still open beside the file. On the screen, the same project title glowed faintly, Project Helix, Core Algorithm. Richard had been working late, and must have left in a hurry. The system was still logged in, no password prompt, nothing. Ethan froze. He knew this was his chance. He inserted his flash drive, opened the folder, and within seconds began copying the digital files. The office was silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the cooling fan as secrets worth billions transferred to his drive. Took photos of the printed pages too, just in case. When he was done, he closed everything carefully, placed the folder back exactly as he found it, and left the office like nothing happened. That night he couldn't sleep. He kept staring at the flash drive, lying on his desk under the dim light of his apartment. Part of him felt guilty. Another part, the stronger one, felt powerful. He began whispering excuses to himself. Richard's had his time. He'll retire soon anyway. I've worked for this. I deserve more. And just like that, loyalty began to rot into betrayal. From that night onward, Ethan started seeing things differently. Richard's trust no longer felt like a gift. It felt like a weakness to exploit. Every meeting became a game, every handshake a step closer to taking control. Richard still looked at him with pride, never suspecting that the man sitting across from him in board meetings was already plotting his downfall. Ethan began building quiet alliances inside the company, a few employees loyal to him, some investors curious about his ideas. But all of it started from that single night, The moment he crossed a line he could never come back from. Richard Kane believed loyalty built empires. Ethan Cross was about to prove it could also destroy them. He had always known he was smart. But now, for the first time, he felt powerful. The stolen Helix files were no longer just data, they were a key. A key to something bigger than Richard Kane, bigger than loyalty, bigger than morality. He didn't know what to do with them. He kept the files hidden, reviewing them late at night, studying every line of code, every schematic Richard had written. He could see the genius behind it, and that only deepened his resentment. The more he understood Project Helix, the more he realized it could make someone a billionaire, if they had the courage to claim it. And Ethan decided he reached out to a few powerful investors under the radar, men who had once tried to partner with Kane Dynamics but were rejected by Richard for being too greedy. They remembered the humiliation. Ethan used that he presented Helix as his own creation, an AI system that could predict global market shifts, optimize defense systems, and even analyze human behavior. The investors were stunned. One of them, a man named Victor Hale, looked Ethan straight in the eye and said, "Son, if this is real, you'll change the world." Ethan smiled. "It's real. I just need backing and freedom from old leadership that doesn't see the future." The investors bit instantly. They agreed to fund the development, but only if Ethan could bring Kane Dynamics into the deal. They wanted Richard's infrastructure and brand power. Ethan knew that meant one thing. Richard had to go first. He played it safe. Small lies, subtle manipulations. He began whispering things to people who mattered. "Richard's been slowing down lately. He's holding back Helix because he doesn't believe it'll work. He's afraid to take risks." He was careful never to sound disloyal, just concerned. And it worked. Soon, board members began questioning Richard's decisions, wondering why such a promising project was locked away. Richard noticed the shift. Meetings felt different. Conversations stopped when he entered the room. Something was wrong, and he could feel it. One evening, after everyone had left, he called Ethan into his office. "Ethan," Richard said quietly, "is there something I should know?" Ethan kept his tone calm. "About what, sir?" "About the way people are suddenly doubting me." Ethan smiled faintly. "You've built this company, Richard. People will always talk. It's jealousy, that's all." Richard studied him for a moment. The same young man he once mentored, now unreadable. He wanted to believe him. He chose to believe him. But the betrayal had already begun. Ethan needed proof to destroy Richard completely, and he already had it, or rather he could create it. Using his access to company files, he forged documents showing that large amounts of money were being transferred from a company's research account to a private account under Richard's name. In reality, those funds had gone to a shell company Ethan created weeks earlier, under the alias RK Holdings. He even ensured the transaction logs matched Richard's approval codes. T was perfect. Flawless, then leaked anonymous information to a financial blog, claiming that Kane Dynamics CEO was secretly diverting funds from a top-secret AI project for personal gain. Within hours, the rumor spread. Headlines appeared online. Tech giant faces scandal. Has Richard Kane been hiding a billion-dollar project? Kane Dynamics under investigation for fraudulent research funding. Investors panicked. The board called for an emergency meeting. That morning, Richard walked into the boardroom unaware of what was waiting for him. When he saw the documents spread across the table, his name, his signature, his company, he felt the ground shift beneath him. "What is this?" he demanded. No one answered. Then Ethan spoke softly, almost regretfully. "It doesn't look good, Richard. The numbers trace back to your accounts." Richard stared at him, confused, betrayed, but still holding on to control. "You think I'd steal from my own company?" "Of course not," Ethan said. "But perception matters. The investors are scared. The media's already running the story. We have to protect the company." Richard realized the trap. It wasn't about truth anymore, it was about reputation. The board voted unanimously to suspend him pending investigation. Richard could fight it, but that would only deepen the scandal. He looked around the room, faces he'd known for years now avoiding his gaze. And then his eyes fell on Ethan. Calm, emotionless, and that moment, Richard understood everything. He didn't lose his company because he made a mistake, lost it because he trusted the wrong man. 3 days later, Richard Kane held a press conference. He announced his temporary resignation, saying it was in the best interest of the company he built. The world saw it as an act of humility. Ethan saw it as victory. As the crowd applauded Richard's speech, Ethan stood in the background, his expression unreadable. Why the following week, the board voted him in as acting CEO of Kane Dynamics. The man who once fetched coffee for Richard Kane was now sitting in his chair, the same chair Richard had once told him he might occupy someday. And as Ethan signed his first document as CEO, he whispered under his breath, "Someday came sooner than you thought." That night, the city lights reflected off the glass walls of his new office. On the desk lay the original Project Helix folder, the same one he had once stolen. He opened it and smiled. What he didn't realize was that some victories come with a price, and his, though sweet now, would soon turn to ashes. Months passed. Ethan Cross had everything he ever wanted: the office, the power, the respect. People called him a visionary. The board praised him for stabilizing the company after Richard's resignation. Magazines labeled him the young CEO changing the future of AI. He smiled at every headline, every compliment, every handshake. But inside, he couldn't silence the quiet unease that followed him everywhere. Success came fast, too fast. And deep down, he knew it was built on something rotten. Still, he told himself it didn't matter. In business, everyone plays dirty. At least, that's what he believed, until Project Helix turned on him. The first problem was small: a system error in one of the AI prototypes. It was supposed to be self-correcting, but instead, it spiraled, crashing entire test networks. Investors complained. Contracts were delayed. Ethan blamed the engineers, fired a few, replaced others, but the problems kept multiplying. What he didn't know was that the real Helix data, the version Richard had developed, had been encrypted. Ethan had stolen an incomplete copy. Without Richard's encryption keys, the system began to break down piece by piece. As the technology failed, the lawsuits began. Partner companies demanded refunds, claiming Ethan misled them about Helix's capabilities. Stock prices fell. The same investors who once praised him now avoided his calls. And while Ethan was scrambling to hold everything together, Richard Kane was quietly working in the shadows. After his resignation, Richard disappeared from the spotlight. Most assumed he was finished, an old man destroyed by scandal. But behind the scenes, he was rebuilding. Not his company, his case. He started from the beginning, tracing every transaction, every forged document. He found the dummy company, RK Holdings. He hired digital forensics experts to uncover Ethan's manipulations. Slowly, piece by piece, he gathered proof, the kind that couldn't be denied. Then one morning the world woke up to a story that made headlines everywhere. Exclusive: Kane Dynamics CEO Richard Kane presents evidence of corporate fraud and data theft. The article included everything: leaked emails, fake transaction logs, and Ethan's private investor deals. There was no escaping it this time. Within hours, Kane Dynamics board called for an emergency meeting. By nightfall, Ethan Cross was suspended indefinitely. The investors who once worshipped him now demanded his resignation. The employees who once admired him refused to meet his eyes. His phone stopped ringing. The silence was louder than applause had ever been. Days later, Ethan stood outside a quiet building in the city outskirts. A modest office with a simple sign, Kane Technologies. Richard had started again, smaller, humbler, but still alive. Ethan entered. The receptionist didn't stop him. Maybe Richard had been expecting this. When he walked into Richard's office, the older man was standing by the window, looking out at the skyline, the same skyline they once conquered together. Richard didn't turn around when he spoke. I wondered how long it would take for you to come." Ethan hesitated. His voice cracked slightly. "I never wanted it to end like this." Richard turned, eyes tired but sharp. "You didn't want it to end, Ethan. You wanted it all." Ethan lowered his gaze. "I was loyal to you. I worked harder than anyone else. I just wanted to prove myself." Richard walked closer. "You did prove yourself. I gave you trust, knowledge, opportunity, everything I had. And you used it to destroy me." He paused, letting the silence weigh heavy between them. Then, with a calm voice, he said the words that cut deeper than any anger could. "I made you, Ethan, and you destroyed yourself." Ethan said nothing. There was nothing left to say. He turned, walked out of the office, and stepped into the rain. The city lights blurred in the puddles beneath his feet, reflections of a dream that had turned into a nightmare. For the first time, the man who had everything finally understood what it meant to have nothing.